to the November 6, 2023 special session. First item we're going to discuss is Director of Schools criteria discussion with Mr. Ben Torres.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Make sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. Before we get started, I wanted to provide a quick overview of the materials you have in front of you. So each of you received a binder. Inside that binder, you will find a couple things. On the left-hand side of the binder, you will see a sample brochure. Now, we'll get to the brochure here in just a few minutes, but this is a sample brochure. And then within the binder, you're going to find a few different pieces of information. On page 1, you'll find background, the background of the search process and the community meetings. On page 2, you will see the questions that were discussed at the community meetings and the overall themes. On page 3, you'll see the timeline. On page 5, you will see the individual survey responses. I would like to note that the online survey responses are verbatim. So those are verbatim responses from the online survey. We placed them in this binder. And then page 44 is the criteria. And I will get to all that, but I just wanted to kind of orient you to what we have to talk about tonight. So tonight we are looking for a few things. First, we're going to review the survey results. We also need the board to establish minimum criteria for the new director and a salary range if possible. That way we can provide that information to potential applicants. So let's go ahead and get started. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. On page 1, you will see the background and the procedures. A few things to note on page 1. Out of the 5 community meetings, we had 56 individuals that attended. The online survey had 409 different responses. So when you look at the results of the community meetings and the survey, you will find all that starting on page 5. Moving on to page 2. This is a summary of the online survey and the community meetings. So we asked 3 questions. What are the good things going on in the school system? What are the challenges a new director will face? And what are the personal characteristics people within the community would like to see in the new director? As far as the good things going on in the school system, the common theme focused on 3 big areas. The educational programs and initiatives. People were very supportive of the CTE programs and the options offered at the high school level. Staff support and recognition. The different programs and just recognition that the system has for staff members, whether it's new staff members, long-term staff members, that was consistent. And then school safety measures. Multiple comments on the SROs and the safety measures that are being implemented. People want to see those things continue. As far as the challenges a new director will face, common theme, teacher retention and recruitment. That was when in just about every meeting and even in the online surveys, teacher retention and recruitment. And unfortunately, that's something being faced across the state. Facilities. Several different community meetings had multiple comments on facilities. Long-term facilities plans. I think at the last board meeting, you all were discussing facilities. And then finally, student behavior and discipline. Common theme from every meeting and the online survey. Any questions on that overview? It's certainly an executive summary, but if you go and you look at the individual comments from the meeting, you can read those comments and you can see where all that ties in. Turning to page 3, I just wanted to touch real quick on, was it? Yes, sir. Sorry.
How many online?
409. Yeah, 409. And then 56 in person. Yes, sir. On page 3, wanted to quickly review the timeline. We are currently on the adopt criteria phase. Once the criteria is adopted, we will distribute the brochure and place the application online and activate the portal so people can actually start applying for the job. We'll receive and process those files. We'll also recruit candidates, acknowledge and verify the candidate files. So in the brochure, you will see several items that candidates must submit. For instance, letters of reference, references, resume, transcripts, teaching license. We'll verify that that information is submitted and complete. We will start checking the credentials and references. And then the portal will close right now on December 15th at midnight.
Ben,
Yes, sir.
can you touch on recruiting the candidates and how y'all go about it? Is it just people that y'all know that have the criteria that we adopt that you're like, hey, you would be a good fit? Or
So
what does that mean?
there's a couple different ways that happens. So the first way, when we conducted each of the community meetings and in the online survey, we asked individuals to write down the name and contact information of anyone they felt like would be a good director of schools. So the first part of that is we're going to reach out to everyone that we have contact information for, or we can find contact information for, and send them a letter stating that the portal is open. If you would like to apply, this is how you apply because someone recommended you. 2, if we think we know a candidate that fits the criteria and what you all are looking for, we'll reach out to them and ask them to apply. That doesn't always guarantee that they will apply, but we also try to reach out to quality candidates and fill this vacancy and other vacancies in searches.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Starting on page 4, it's the procedures. As I discussed at the last meeting, we'll refer up to 5 candidates to you all. It may be less than 5, depending on the number of applicants and if they meet the minimum qualifications and criteria. At that point, you all will decide whether or not you want to accept that recommendation, add to, completely disregard. It's 100% within your authority to do any of those. So we just make that recommendation. I won't necessarily get into the rest of the procedures. We'll discuss those when I come back, but I just wanted to touch on that first part. Starting on page 5, you will see a breakdown of each question and the community meetings. So you can see the first question, what are the good things going on in Dickson County schools? Each community meeting has its own separate area, so you can see the comments at the community meeting. And if you turn over to page 6, at the very bottom starts the verbatim comments from the online survey. And that just carries over. I encourage you all to take this home, take the time to read through the survey comments, read through the community meeting comments. Certainly want to consider those as you come back and you interview candidates. Before I move on, are there any questions on anything so far? I want to direct your attention to page 45. So the online survey and the in-person survey contained a sheet listing 21 different criteria that individuals may want to see in the next director of schools. On page 45, you have all the criteria listed out. You have the results from the individual meetings, the averages, and then the next to last column, you will see an average. The highlighted boxes are the top 10. The far right column is the ranking. So the number 1 response across the board was ability to listen. The number 2 response, an effective communicator, both oral and written. The number 3 response, ability to initiate and adapt to change. Those were the top 3 responses. I will say 4 through 10, they were very close when you look at the averages. Now that you see those top 10 responses, if you turn back to page 44, those responses are ranked 1 through 10 on the proposed criteria. So we took the feedback from the survey and incorporated that feedback into the criteria. So there's two pieces to this criteria. There's the minimum qualifications and then the characteristics or individual qualities that you're looking for in the next director of schools. And your questions, it's suggested that your questions, when you interview the candidates, you interview them and have questions that are based on these criteria, because these are the criteria that the people in the community want to see the most. Now, you all can ask any question you want. That's certainly up to you all, but that's just a suggestion. I'll let you take a second just to look over the survey results and the proposed criteria. And please let me know if you have any questions.
So
And go ahead.
pages 6 to 42 is all just answers from online, right?
Online survey and the community meeting. So you will be able to look at the responses across the board. And I also think it's helpful on page 45 to look at the things that didn't make the top of the list as well.
I'm surprised on the 18, 19, 20, and 21.
Interesting how some of these things are so simple, kind of refreshing things you think of, but that other people notice too. Just a simple comment.
So what I'm look at 18, 19, 20 just now because Ms. Brogdon said that. So, for instance, successful experience as a director of school is ranked 19, meaning the community and the meetings don't really care if he's ever had any experience as a director of school, right? That's if I'm,
To me,
that's ranked number 19 in there, right?
they care more about the first 18 if
Than
that
they do.
helps than they do
Yeah.
19, 20, and 21.
Interesting ranking, I like that.
It is. A doctorate degree came in 20.
There were several comments that indicated that having a doctorate should not be a prerequisite. And that's consistent even with the online survey and every other meeting. And also, failed to mention, but the top 10 that you'll find on page 44, those are also the director of schools characteristics that are listed out in the brochure. And the brochure is what will be distributed with the rest of the vacancy information.
It's interesting to see the different scores, the swing of them, between classified staff and the teachers. There might be a 2-point spread there. And a couple of them. It's kind of interesting.
I'm happy to discuss the brochure as you all look through the information. So the brochure will have the minimum qualifications and characteristics. On the second page, we have some information about the school system, the community, and system facts. The system facts, we reviewed those from the state report card and the annual statistical report released by the Department of Education. And then, most importantly, the application process. Every candidate will be asked to submit a formal letter of interest, a resume, a copy of educational certifications and licenses, their university transcripts, and 5 professional references. And everything can be submitted through our online portal, which helps cut down on waiting on things in the mail.
The screening committee, is that internal?
Correct, it is internal.
That's not just your thing.
So at this point, Madam Chair, the biggest item we're missing is the minimum qualifications. And once we have those minimum qualifications, we can add those to the brochure and the board can approve the brochure. Looking at the survey results, it's very telling that a doctorate is not required. So a lot of boards use a master's in education, 3 years of administrative experience, and a teaching license as the minimum qualifications. Anyone applying must possess those 3 things. Now, you all are free to add, take away, but I wanted to provide you with at least a starting point.
I think in general, the least but most supportive qualifications gives you a bigger pool to meet the other criteria. More screen is not a bad thing. I guess we need a definition of administrative experience, but
When we look at administrative experience, we look at time either in central office or as a principal, some type of school level or system level administrator. We take both of those into account.
y'all consider assistant principals administrators too?
We do consider that still an administrative position, but we also look at the difference between candidates and the positions that they've held. So if the principal time is all assistant principal, but you have somebody else that's been an assistant principal, a teacher, and has significant experience, we look at the candidate holistically. But you all are free to designate whether or not you would consider that administrative experience, and we'll conduct the search based on whatever you decide.
I think administrative experience and the way you word it holistically is probably very important. I know while I'll see assistant principals throughout our system that have been long time employees, do a good job, step up whenever the principal's gone. May bring some experience from somewhere else to that position. Shouldn't be excluded because they're an assistant. From the holistic standpoint, that kind of addresses that too.
And the 3-year threshold, is that just, is that, when is that based? Or is that just generally used? It sounds like.
Generally used, and that ensures someone may not have stepped in that position, maybe not been a perfect fit, and then moved back. We look for some type of consistency in that position, some type of success.
I would like to see that to be a longer period, maybe 5 years, maybe just a thought. I mean, 3 years is a fairly short period of time. And it can be, I'm assuming, it would have to come from one solid 5 years. It could be
Correct.
a longer period of time.
And you will see individuals that principal, central office, and then maybe at some point they decide to move to a different district and teach, or things come up and
We look at the same lines. I was thinking about the same, but maybe somehow it's weighted. 15 years of administrative experience, you're carrying more than somebody with 3 or 4 if it's weighted with the other criteria. So what about minimum requirements? We're looking at starting points.
correct.
And I think, not to make light of some of the criteria I've seen before, but I think we might close the door on a potential leader. I think just that's the comments to hear from the public. I think developing a leader might be as important as finding. I think the thought of going out and find somebody that is going to walk in, take over, we're done with it, is not the right direction. I think we teach grow your own. I think a lot of systems do, but I think that these leaders are up and coming. Always have been, always will be.
Does anyone have an issue with the masters of education?
Say with the central office or administration, I know I'm just repeating everything because I probably wasn't listening, but central office, principal, or we can say it's vice principal if we want to have that in there. It's all up under that 3-year administration, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm just looking at central office administrative experience, ranked 18, where successful experience as director ranked 19, but experience as a school principal just missed the cut at 12, and it didn't miss it by much. So I wonder if there's situations where a principal's just been the principal for all the years and had great assistant principals up under them that couldn't move up because they were in a system where the principal was established and that principal was doing a great job. There's no, but they may want to move somewhere. I think that administration position I'd like to see that added. I think at some point if you have a good school district and they just have a principal that might have gotten there when they were young and have been the principal for years and years and years and plan on retiring as the principal, their assistant principals may not have been able to move up. So I'll do that. If we put that principal mark, then we may lose applicants because they never met that.
Someone had to have the opportunity to reach.
Right. Just never had their opportunity to get there.
I think that's what I was kind of alluding to when I said fine administration, and by making it a holistic approach, which I like that answer, it probably answers that question for me.
We would combine all the times when looking at the minimum. So if it was 1 year as an assistant principal, 1 year as a principal, and then 4 years as a, supervisor, that time combined would be 6 years as an administrator.
Do we want it to be 5 years instead of 3?
I just like the idea of it being 5, especially when you're
Combining everything.
several experiences, and I think that's just. I just think it's invaluable.
I want to disagree a little bit with you, Kurt. I think that if we get 2 applicants that one has 5 and one has 3, I think it'll weigh off in an interview process. Since we're making a minimum requirement, I don't know. I don't want to cut somebody out that could be a great candidate because they only had 4 years, where they would, what I mean? And I think it would weigh off into our interview process that if you had 2 that were the exact same in every situation, except this person's got a lot more experience, I think that would weigh on our interview and that we would pick the correct one. Hate to see anybody get cut out as a minimum criteria.
So a lot of things can take place in 5 years compared to 3 years. A lot of different experiences. So, I'm not here to hold up the process.
I think ultimately I want to see the qualifications from a minimum standpoint, encourage applicants and not discourage. I don't want to make them so stringent that the criteria picks a director for us. I want the review committee and the board to make that decision. So I see both sides, and I do agree with both sides from the standpoint they both have good points. I don't want to see the qualification pick somebody as much as get a starting point to encourage that application process too.
Any other comments? So, go ahead.
Are there other minimum criteria that folks use besides these 3? Or is it
Some people look for specific experience in a position, for instance, so many years as a principal or so many years at a district level. Of course, that would depend on what you specifically need. Some look for candidates that have worked in specific types of systems. So if you have I'll give you an example of a large metro district, for instance. They may be looking for candidates that have worked in larger school systems. So they may make that a criteria that we want candidates that have seen experience in a large urban school district.
Is it more likely somebody from a big, I won't say like Metro Nashville, would look at a job here as opposed to somebody, say, from a district that's not as big as us, want to move up?
I think there's a potential to have applicants from anywhere, to be honest. If somebody is looking to move to that next step, there are only so many superintendent positions or director of schools positions in the state. And I think you may find more candidates from similarly situated districts, but I wouldn't rule out somebody from a bigger district applying either. You all, and Dickson County is kind of unique that you have several large school districts within a very short drive.
It's also unique that it's not big and it's not small. You're kind of stuck in the middle, which will be the same discussion when it comes to pay and when it comes to everything you do. It's, you're competing with the larger districts, but you're having to survive like some of the smaller ones. Unfortunately, not. We got a lot more benefits than some of the smaller ones, but it's really it's always been in the middle, and it creates its own issues by being there.
Another example of that just popped in my head when Mr. Haley was speaking, teaching experience, looking for a certain amount of years as a teacher before they move to the next position. In some instances, someone might come into the system and automatically hop into an administrative position, and some boards want to see some type of consistent teaching. And if you look, that was actually number 4, which is incorporated in number 4 in the criteria: a respected instructional leader with a strong academic background, understanding of the day-to-day operations of the classroom, and sound knowledge of instruction, curriculum, and educational programs.
I think we've seen that on some upper level appointees, that's been a point of contingency in comments that we saw at a few commissioners back. The classroom experience for making a state level like that, so.
Question. Do we have to vote on all these individually? For the experience, the master's degree, how's that gotta go?
You could take them individually, or you could take them as one. If there was a consensus, I would encourage you to take them as one. But if there's uncertainty, it may be easier to address the 1 or 2 things that everybody can agree on, and then have a further discussion on maybe the one item that everyone has a differing opinion.
Do we want to add a teaching experience time?
So it's one of the few items in the top 10 that can be a tangible item. It can be tangible. A lot of those are not going to be tangible. There'll be more interview type directives. But if that's important, it's the time to add that.
If we have, you could add that they have 5 years experience, and inside that 5 years, have 2 years of teaching experience. Do something like that.
What do you think, Mr. Trevor, for teaching experience as a teacher?
I said, well, it's not one of, it's not one of my biggest things, but 5, are you saying 5 years with 2?
Well,
Some level of teaching experience would be important for them to understand just what goes on in a classroom. Uh,
2 years without not much.
No, it's not.
2 years just to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes 5 years.
Teaching, does it matter if it's elementary or high school?
Mr. Raymond, I like the idea. It could be a combination of 5 years of administrative experience, or 5 and, or 3 and 2 with teaching experience. It's something that, I just think someone's been in the administrative level for that long. I think they've kind of garnered something, or they wouldn't have remained in that position. But I think, just as the criteria shows, I mean, it's important to everyone that folks have some teaching experience. So I think that including that in it as an option,
Yeah.
I think addresses that. Mr. Raymond, I think it's a good idea.
I think that I love having these numbers. I love numbers, love stats. And Steve, what you said is right. As far as a measurable, you know, that's a measurable. And some of these we don't have. We can tell here what they do want for us to be better at, as far as when we hire a director on number 1, 2s, and 3. But like you said, 4s, and if you look at the teachers there, they're the highest score in there. They matched another one there on line item 14, which has again to do with being an effective communicator, both oral and written. And then, you know, that's between that and then the 2 listings, number 1 and number 2, I believe it was. Well, 2 was 4.89 as well. So I think I'll just tell you from my experience, it's always good to be able to jump in there and help if you're a boss or a leader or owner or anything, to get right in there with them. And I think that's what these teachers are looking for, because they have put that very high on their thing. And I think for them to, this is why we had these surveys, and this is why we had Mr. Torres do these community meetings, is to find out. And that is the second to the highest on the teacher's list, is to have some type of teaching experience. So I think we've got to incorporate that. I think the teachers are talking to us as well as the online survey. I think that's the online, the classified staff for the kind of tied for second there as far as line 3 goes. My 2 cents.
So are you saying 2 years of teaching at least in the
Well,
5 years, or you don't know?
I'm just trying to get something in between these 2 guys. You know, one wants 5,
That would be 4.
one wants 3. I know, but if we go with the 5, we can bring at least 2 years experience in as far as teaching goes. And I'm saying that because the teachers are saying it's important.
Okay, like I said, I agree. I think 3 years of administrative experience and 2 years of teaching experience can make up to 5 or 5 years of administrative experience. A combination.
Okay. Yeah. Got a motion?
Madam Chair, apparently I'm the motion person. I will make a motion that we adopt the criteria, the minimum criteria for consideration, that being a master's in education, and 5 years of experience, and that can be combined. It can be 5 years of administrative experience, or it can be 3 years of administrative experience and 2 years of teaching. And the teaching, and the third one would be the teaching licensure. That is my motion.
I'll second.
Clarification question, whenever you open questions.
You want him to repeat it?
Okay.
That's why I think we should.
The three minimum criteria, the first being a master's in education. The second being 5 years of experience, either that can be combined. It can be 5 years of administrative experience, or it can be 3 years of administrative experience and 2 years of teaching experience. Those that combine to make 5 years. But we're dealing with a 5-year time period at minimum. And the third criteria would be a teaching licensure.
An active teaching license.
Yes, sir.
If they got 20 years in the office and then keep their license, is that how that works?
I think that's right.
So have to have had a teaching license then, not current. Is that what you're saying?
No, it would, if we have somebody that has 20 years of experience in the administrative level, I'm assuming they would have their teaching license. Still active.
They don't necessarily have a active teacher license unless they keep that, there's two separate licenses.
That's right,
An
okay.
administrator license and a teacher license.
They could have let the teacher license lapse, stuck with the instructional leader license as the license. I think that's the name of the license now.
You would just say an active state license? Or, you either have to have an administrative license or a teaching license.
Thank you for raising this, Mr. Hall.
I'm good with either license. I mean, if they've been an administrator for 20 years, they let their teacher's license go. I don't know why you would. Does it cost money to renew it or something?
It
Well,
doesn't.
then why would you ever let it go?
You have to get certain professional development over the course of so
Okay.
many years to
Okay.
keep and renew that. But an active, we could say an active teaching or administrator license.
Yes. That's what yes, the license would be exactly that, either teacher or administrator. Active. So I amend my motion.
I'm ready to go after Mr. Haley.
My question got answered.
Okay. Are we, in this vote, are we adopting this, or we're adopting this too, is that correct? No.
My motion is only for the criteria,
Okay.
just the minimum criteria.
While we're
Minimum
talking
standard.
about that minimum standard, I guess my question is on tenure. And I've heard talk about, directors retiring their tenure when they become a director. And can you give us some input on that?
So one of the things we recommend, when we conduct a search, we work with the district on the contract with the new director of schools. And we recommend that if the director comes from the system or has tenure in the system at some point, that people don't always agree to this, but we would recommend that they waive the tenure once becoming director of schools. Because at that point, once they're a director of school, they're the director, they're under contract. So one, their contract is going to govern termination with or without cause. Two, if you have a situation where something occurs and the board and director no longer, may agree, and the board wants to move on. Well, if that director has tenure within the system, they're entitled to a position within the system. So then you run into a situation where someone that was let go by the board ends up back in the system, and it's not always a very positive relationship. So we always recommend that if the director has tenure within the system, they waive it and waive their tenure rights upon accepting the position and signing the contract.
More of, I guess, a contract negotiation than a criteria.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Frazier?
Mr. Vanderburg,
Yes?
Ms. Brogdon,
Yes.
Mr. Haley,
Yes.
Mr. Chadwick,
Yes.
Mr. Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
all ayes.
What's our next?
So that minimum qualification will be incorporated within the brochure. Are there any questions on the brochure? If not, if you all could adopt that, certainly appreciate it. Get everything posted tomorrow.
I got a question about it.
Sure.
The director of school characteristics is not to be misrepresented as minimum qualifications.
Correct. Two different things completely. The first process is looking to see if they have the minimum qualifications that you all outlined. If they do, then we look at their experience. We talk to references and compare that information to the characteristics.
The characteristics comes from the top 10.
Correct. And you all have helped kind of interweave the characteristics with the minimum qualifications by addressing the teacher experience.
The reason I asked that question, Mr. Torres, is because on the last one, while I like it, and it needs to stay in some form, I didn't want it to be construed to eliminate someone that's not a director by saying has a record of working effective with school board, because not many of the applicants are going to have a record of working effective with the school board. So
Certainly.
maybe the ability to work with it. It's okay left like this as long as it doesn't become a criteria.
And that is certainly noted. Absolutely.
You want to do the same thing for number 6 then? Proven ability to work with the county commissioners and say, I know it's characteristic of what we want, but we may not have someone that has a proven ability to work with county commissioners that is more than qualified as a position. Number 6, the top right-hand column. It says 7, top right.
Maybe both of those, just like you're saying, just say ability to work and has the ability of working. That should take care of it.
Just to make sure I'm clear.
Top right.
Top right, take out the word proven and just say ability to work with the county commission. Is that accurate?
Sure. That'd be fine.
And then
The bottom one has the ability of working effectively in school boards, or demonstrates the ability. On either one of those, you want to put demonstrates the ability.
has the ability to work effectively with. How does that sound? Or
Yeah.
what was the other? I just want to make sure I write it down.
The top one on the right hand column, proven ability. Right there, it just
And then the bottom, what was that language again, just to clarify?
We just want to put ability in there. You're the lawyer, make it sound right.
Candid?
It's just they're not gonna have a record, so we gotta get the record part out.
And they may not have a proven ability of working with the county commission if they have never been a director before. So
How about on number 7, ability to work with the county commission? And then on the last one, ability to work effectively with a board.
Move to adopt with the amendment.
Second.
So we have a motion to adopt it, changing ability to work with the county commission and ability to work effectively with the school board. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Vanderbilt,
Yes?
Ms. Brogdon,
Yes.
Mr. Haley,
Yes.
Mr. Chadwick,
Yes.
Mr. Underwood,
yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
all ayes.
Motion carries. Next.
Salary range. Madam Chair.
Which I'm assuming range because it's gonna be based on the experience, correct?
Ultimately, it will be up to you all. We're just hopefully looking for a range when applicants call, if they're in a position making more than what you all plan to offer, they don't end up applying and then withdrawing.
It's hard to give that range because I think if we have someone who meets our minimum criteria and they shine as an applicant versus and if we have that that person that we want to hire versus somebody that may have been a director for 15 years, I think that they're going to be worth more with their experience. And I don't know how you put that range in there, because someone who's been a director for 15 years, if they see $130,000, they're going to be like, I'm out. But somebody that I wouldn't want to put a range up too high on somebody that doesn't have that number of years of experience. So I really don't know how to put that range in there. So I'll let Ms. Brogdon tell us. Go ahead, Mike. What do you think?
Well, if they come from Kingsport, we could probably get them pretty good shape. We could probably get them in here for around 70 or 80. Right?
Well, and yeah, that
They're
I
still
believe that number was
500 students less than us.
we pulled that directly from the annual statistical report, but
Not really
Might
focused.
have put one out, I believe.
say
Might have put one out, didn't they?
potentially.
Maybe you can focus your flyers in Kingsport.
I do believe they pay a lot more than that.
So I looked at these salaries and looked not only from the same school size, but it appears that East Tennessee probably has a higher starting pay. Obviously, from being competitive, but when I also look at the school systems and the rankings, we always look at Williamson County and think, wow, they always have really good scores, but you see so many from East Tennessee that they're successful, and it almost makes you look and wonder why, because there's several clustered together over there. But even when you rank the pay with the surrounding counties and even with the population size, I think if you're going to advertise a starting pay, I think you're going to have to be in the 150 mark. I wouldn't have said that 2 months ago. I would have thought 135 mark. Looking at the surrounding counties, I mean, Cheatham County, 5,600 students, 140.
And this is data reported to the state. So
Yeah, it is. It's a year old, I guess, too. A lot of
It is.
So,
that's the most recent data that's available.
so it was ours, so I kind of adjusted like ours would have been too. So it really, hand for hand goes up. We've budgeted that price point for a director, and that is a moving target every year by successes and just by normal attrition. I even looked at where we started 12 years ago was 125, and looked at the increase of salaries and did a percentage ranking. It still puts you right in the 145 to 150 range. So somewhere in that range is what every good profession I looked at went towards. I'll let y'all go from there.
I feel like it's almost like adopting a minimum. You know what I mean? I feel like whatever we put out there, I think it's almost like that's the minimum. I don't know that we could ever go down from whatever we decide.
I think we're
And-
also advertising for the maximum on the qualifications and the interview process too. So it kind of, I see what you're saying, thought the same thing, but are we going to not get applicants for that?
Right.
People do request that information. They believe it or not, they want to know whether they're moving into and it's not something we will advertise necessarily, but it's
Something they're gonna ask.
they're going to ask.
Funny how people actually want to get paid.
I believe I'd ask that question too, but I feel like whatever we say that, I think that's going to be the minimum. And if someone comes in with great experience and looks like a superstar in their interview, I mean, I think it could always go up, but I don't know that it could ever go down.
Well, to your all's point earlier, we've got someone with 3 years of administrative experience, 2 years of teaching experience. That's not going to necessarily be the same as
Right.
a Dr. Weeks who's been here,
Right.
10 years or someone else. So we want to give ourselves a little bit of
Got to have some range there, don't we?
right. Yeah, that's at
40,
140.
146.
That was
last year.
21-22 year, we're at 146, we're about 153, 154. We are now. But my first thought was you go back close to where you started, go back up, but there was no one else doing it.
It's got to be based on experience. You know, when they put in an application, will you be asking their current pay rate?
We do have a question on there if they're willing to disclose it.
Right. Oh, I always looked at when somebody would come to me, I'd always want to look at how much they were getting paid elsewhere because I don't want to waste their time. If I, not too many people are looking for a lateral move. And so, but like Kirk said, 2 years teaching, 3 years experience in administrative, 150 would be a pretty good jump. So we've got, is there some way to put a range in there based on experience? And how do we quantify that?
This is just an example. So you all could say the range is 140 to 155 depending on experience.
Yeah.
And that takes the bottom end into account. That also takes the top end into account. And if somebody shows up that you're willing to pay more or negotiate,
Right.
that option exists as well. And that bottom number isn't a floor necessarily. If you all feel that the individual you want to negotiate for less, that's certainly within your purview as well.
I think I would rather put in a bigger range than that, something like, what did we start 12 years, did you say 125?
It was 125, wasn't it?
So, I mean, we could maybe start, I mean, that was 12 years ago or whatever, but if you say, 135 to 175 based on experience and give that big range, I mean, anybody that's going to be applying that is meeting the minimum criteria with the minimum things has got to know that they're going to be at the bottom of that pay scale. Anybody who has got years and years of experience and meets and exceeds our minimum criteria a bunch has got to know that they're going to be interviewing at the top of this pay scale. We have to have the ability to move around and not just put their. I think a wider range would be more susceptible to a wider range of applicants.
Then it comes back in contract negotiations, what's the cap?
Look at budgetary restrictions. We've got a amount budgeted for director. Then if you exceed that, you're going to be going for the amendment. I see what you're saying on the range, but I also think what you put out is what's going to happen. Last time we did 125 and we were budgeted at 100. We had to have that adjustment. And I think if you make a range of such, you're going to get stalled up. So I think what you're saying is just the opposite on the top end. You could advertise 135 to 150 based on experience, but if you start getting above that, you're going to have to ask for more money.
125 was the initial start.
That was what was advertised also. We advertised 125.
Well, in the middle of the two, it could be 140 to 160 depending on experience. That kind of.
Do we know what our budget is for the?
150 and change, 154, 153. Is that right, Ms. Frazier? Just over 150 is the budgeted amount for a director at this point?
It is plus 150, 150,000. It's
54.
plus that. Yeah. Of course, we've already used some months of that, so.
Sure. So when you And I assume the interim comes out of that also, is that right? The same, My mind would-
I think so.
Interim will come out of that same bucket, correct?
Yes, that's the only bucket it can come out of.
so you're saying that in May or something, we'd have to do a amendment to add money if we go, is there something wrong with doing that?
I think you're leaving that decision for pay up to a different body instead of us, if we go above which budget, is that not correct?
It will be, no, that will be in the amendments, and it will be this group that will make that amendment.
But if
And
we
those
make,
amendments will need to be done probably soon after a new director is put into place, and we see how much additional that we will need, because we need that money in place so that we can pay properly.
if we pay more than what's budgeted now, we have to have the legislative body's approval to pay more, which is going to delay that out.
Well, all amendments have to go to the county commission.
So if we stay under what our budget line item is now, it doesn't go for the amendment.
Not currently, that would be right, but at a point, we're gonna figure that and where that point is, and if nothing else, in the amendments at the end of the year, when we do all of the cleanup amendments, that we do that in May to present to the county commission in June, then it would be included at that time.
So Steve, what you're saying is if it goes any higher than that, there's a possibility that we could not get the amendment to pay the man or woman.
I think it could create a potential issue even with an amendment if we go outside what we have budget already.
I understand what you're saying, but I mean, I don't think if we get the right person, if we believe it's the right person, and this board wholeheartedly supports the person, I mean, if it's 5,000, 10,000, I mean, depending on the number of things, I would hope the commission would say, look, you all got the right person, you went through this process, and it's, I mean, I get the point. We're locking ourselves into, okay, we're not going to spend any more than this. But we've got this person that we really think is dynamic and is going to be here and is going to serve us well. I don't know. I like the range. It's a matter of what the range is.
I don't disagree with you a bit more. I fully agree. But I think when you say 140 to 175, I think you're going to wind up at a standoff at that point. I think that can be addressed at that point in time. What you're advertising and
Because we can always go over what we advertise, should we get somebody who's more qualified than we expect. But if we do say 175, they're going to come in whoever and demand 175.
we're talking about minimum qualifications, on number of qualifications, not maximum. So, obviously anybody is going to be above that minimum, and then you're going to get in. I think the numbers for what the economy speaks on, what the economy pays for that position, has to have a economic max on what a community puts into a director. And I think the surrounding counties, the counties our size from across the state, and all those breakdown that was sent to us, I think by you, was that sent to us at one time? I think in all four categories, they all point to the same range, really 135 to 150. I think 150 is the cap side, but if you advertise 135 to 150 and you don't get applications, you've got to re-advertise. If you get 30 and you have to minimize down to 5, then you're fine. It's like any other employee of any business. You advertise what you're going to pay, you either get applicants or you don't. And I think you keep that range of what's in your budget at this point in time.
Is that a motion?
135 to 150 range based on experience and qualifications. That'd be a motion.
Second.
A motion for the range to be 135 to 150 based on experience
Qualifications.
and qualification. Second, Aaron. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Vanderbilt,
Yes.
Ms. Brogdon,
Yes.
Mr. Haley,
Yes.
Mr. Chadwick,
Yes.
Mr. Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
all ayes.
Motion passes.
Any other questions, Madam Chair?
Any other questions for Mr. Perez?
How often is it within the system? You know, the new director is within the system as opposed to coming out from out of a different system.
I would say I don't have a statistical number. Ultimately, it's certainly up to you all. There are some time, and there are times where someone has left the system, went to another position in another system, and comes back. And would you all consider that in the system or outside the system? I mean, people have different definitions of that, or somebody that's completely within the system. So you see all three.
Dave?
How many systems are currently seeking a new director? Roughly, I'm expecting that.
We're working on 2 searches right now, Dickson County and Collierville. I know there have been a few other systems that have conducted either their own search or used a firm.
Clarkville's the city school system.
It is. It's a city system right outside of
Memphis.
Memphis, Shelby County.
Thank you.
How much are they?
I can find that information.
We'll make sure we get it before that.
It's a lot longer drive for you to go home every night
Okay.
from Shelby County.
Certainly.
Thank you.
So we'll get all this posted and sent out tomorrow, and we will provide you weekly updates with applicant names as they start to come in. Just kind of expectation setting. Usually the first week or two, it's quiet, and then they start to hopefully come in.
This is all really good information. I'm glad that we opted to do
Now,
the big one like
how will
that.
they know where to apply for it?
So when we send this out, we will send it to you all in the school system. You can post it on your website and send it out. We will send it to the superintendent's organization, principals, all board members, all current superintendents.
So if somebody were to just Google director openings, they will be able to get to it that way.
They would be able to get to it that way.
I
You
just
just
found the
didn't
card
find
that
it.
Bill wants.
Okay,
Yeah. So
thank you.
absolutely. And please feel free to call if y'all have any questions.
Recess.
Yeah, we'll recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir.